Okay, we're looking at an exact emerge planter monitor. It's called the 3 HP monitor. This is our normal run screen that we should come to when we first start the engine in the tractor. So I kind of want to walk through some of the run tabs here. My first tab is my seeds per acre, and obviously that's your population, and you get a bar graph across here. Notice your clutches are all green for your clutch sections. The second tab is singulation, so this gives me if I have doubles and skips, and I get my average skips, the row that's the worst, my average multiples, the row that's the worst, and then I get my worst singulation row. Coefficient of variation is pretty much the average error. So if my coefficient of variation is running 0.1 and I'm running 36,000, or basically every 6 inches, then if my coefficient of variation is a 0.1, then that means the average error in my spacing is 0.6 of an inch. If it's 0.2, that would mean that my average error in spacing would be 1.2 inches if I've got a 6-inch average spacing based on my population. So that's kind of what coefficient of variation is. And down at the bottom again, I've got my minimum and maximum of my averages. The next one is giving me my downforce by row. There's 5 sensors on a 24 row, there's 3 on a 16, and so on and so forth. That'll vary depending on what model you've got. But it's going to tell me my margin on each row that has the sensor on it. And that's based on the sensor that's on the gauge wheels back on the row unit. My last one is my ride quality, and I'll have some bar graphs here indicating what my ride quality is. Now down here in the bottom, I can also, which is new for 2016, I can hit what we call ground contact. And it will give me, right now I'm on ride, I can switch it back to ground contact, and it will give me what my ground contact or percent of ground contact is. Now what ground contact is, that means that the gauge wheels are remaining in contact with the ground at the depth that you set. So that means that if you have 100% ground contact, you should not have any shallowing of your row unit. But if I want to switch back to ride, there's my ride. And again, it's giving me my minimum row, my maximum row, and then scanning all the other rows. If I want to go back to ground contact, I simply hit that button, and that's ground contact. Also on my run page, I go up here to the top, and I hit that button, and that brings up my list of the presets for my population that I've pre-programmed in the setup part. So to change population, I come to this page, I simply select the target population that I want, and this machine will adjust immediately. Over here I've got my margin. This is where I can insert my target margin. Right now I've got it set to 100 pounds of margin. Now that's not downforce, that's my margin. Margin is the extra weight on the row unit over and above what is required to get the row unit in the ground. Downforce is the force that the row unit is applying to the row unit. A couple other things here on my run screen. I've got my vacs right here, and they will fluctuate based on my left, center, and right. I am on a Bauer planter, so I do have 3 vac blowers on this machine. If you're on a 1770, you'll only have 2, but on this particular planter, I've got 3. And then I've got some other things, performance monitor items. I've got my acre counter, my vac, my speed, acres to 0, acres an hour, seeds per acre, acres an hour, all that kind of thing. And you can set that to kind of whatever you want. If I want to see a little bit kind of a snapshot, that's my snapshot button that gives me an overall performance of that specific row. So if I go out and pick another row, it'll give me the overall performance of that row as well. This row, this will be where I would actually prime my meters, but first I need to turn on my generator. Now this one happens to have a PTO generator on it, so I'm going to turn the tractor PTO on. And once I've got the PTO engaged, or if you're on a hydraulically driven generator set up on your ExactEmerge planter, you're going to just have to make sure that SCV is on, or if it's plugged into the Power Beyond, it'll be running all the time. So once I've got it engaged, I'm going to hit my generator, and it's going to turn green and say on. So now my generator's on, I've got my electrical power set up. So if I want to prime the meters, I would simply go in here and I would hit that button, and that's going to turn the belts and the meter. If I'm done with the season, or I'm done at the end of the day, it'd be a good practice. I can purge just the belts, so it won't turn the meter and it'll just turn the belts, and that would be this one. It's kind of like what we had on our variable rate drive planters in the past, where you could actually prime. You could prime your meters, and it would turn the meters about half a turn. That's kind of what you're getting with this as well. I got another button left, and this is kind of my settings. So if I want to enable fast start, now what does fast start do? Well, fast start, when you lower the planter, if that is checked, what that's going to do is that's actually going to start to turn the meters and the brushes at a 1 mile an hour pace until you start to move. Now that's going to time out after a few seconds. So if you lower the planter and that's checked, every time you lower the planter, as soon as it's down, those meters and that brush are going to start to turn at 1 mile an hour. So what that's going to do is that's going to eliminate those dead stop skips. If I do check that, I'm going to want to check that as well. I'm going to want to, what that button does, where it says section control is suppressed during fast start, what that's going to do is set your section control off only when you're in the fast start mode, so that when you lower the planter and the fast start begins, your section control is just not going to shut it off immediately. So you want that one checked as well. These are my step values for my downforce. If I hit the up or down button on the run screen, it's going to adjust it up or down 20 pounds. This is my active downforce pause timer, and what that is it's going to wait 10 seconds. It's going to look for if you set your margin at 100 pounds, it's going to look for it to be out of range for 10 seconds before it starts to make an adjustment. So that way it's not sitting there bouncing up and down all the time and trying to just chase its tail. And then of course I have enable active downforce. If I don't want to enable active downforce, I simply uncheck that, and I will have a normal non-active, or just basically a touch set type downforce setup. If I want to set my alarms to give me a warning, there's where I can set all my percentages and downforce and things like that. But you can set those to your preference. These are the factory defaults, but you're welcome to change them as you see fit. So that kind of covers the run page for our ExactEmerge 3 HP monitor. Okay, now we're going to go through the seed setup page. This is where we're going to set up our population and those kind of things. So we're going to go into seed setup right here. Okay, so we've got to enter our crop. So we're going to say that it's corn. And we can set a couple different things here. We want to make sure we're planting corn, and then we want to make sure that we indicate that we have the correct disc. If you've got a popcorn disc, or if you've got just a straight corn disc, these are things you're going to want to make sure. And it tells you how many holes are in the disc right here, but it's grayed out and we can't really change it. If I want to do by mapping group, or I want to do some kind of custom thing for seed corn, I want one row plant and a half rate or something like that, I can do all that right here. But for this, for all intents and purposes, for right now, we're just going to focus on a single rate across the whole planter. So once I get that set, I'm going to go to my rates tab, and here's where I've set up all the list of rates that I've got of what I'm going to plant, and it gives me my high worn and my low worn. Now if I want to change one, let's say that I want to change this 34,000, I hit that, and I just put in a new target population. So let's say that that's going to be 34.5. Okay, it's automatically going to set my high and low worn 10% over what I've got, and it gives me the seeds per inch, basically, that I'm going to be looking at. Okay, or inches per seed, not seeds per inch. So that's how you would change those inside of there. So if I want to change to something else, if I want to go to soybeans, it's going to do the same thing. I can set a new rate. So I got 120,000. If I want to put a new one in, I'm going to put 130 in there. I'm going to hit OK. Now you want to make sure and check it. If I don't check it, it won't show up on my operator's run screen. So when I hit the button to change it, it won't be there for me to select it. So I'm going to put in another one. I'm going to say 140. And so on and so forth. You get the idea. again, you want to make sure and check it. So we're going to go back to corn. And again, it remembers all of our presets at that point in time. So that's going to cover our seed setup button. Okay, now we're going to cover the planter setup button. It's over here on my run screen. I'm going to hit planter setup. And this is my frame configuration. I just tell it how many rows, what my row spacing is, and it'll figure what my planter width is. If I want to give my planter a name, I can change all that, but it's going by the serial number of the planter. Planter data, this is my physical width and my track spacing. My section control turn on time and turn off time are also in here by default. Now I can tweak these in my swath control button in my 2630, but they do come pre-programmed from the factory with a suggested amount. My planter dimensions, again, it's got all the factory default measurements in there. Now you're going to want to make sure and check those depending on your planter and configuration. They should be correct from the factory, but you do need to verify that those are correct. And then of course my GPS dimensions. If I for some reason have a GPS receiver back on the planter and on the implement, I would want to verify what those are. I don't have that scenario on my system, so we won't be able to put anything in right now. So now we're going to go to our sensors tab. Okay, this is the height sensor, and right now it says I'm all the way up, which I am, and it's flashing around 100%. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to drop the planter to where you want that thing to start planting and stop planting, and then you'll go into your button here and then you set it to where you want it. And that's kind of like calibrating our height sensor like we used to do on our variable rate drive planters from before. My tractor speed, I'm going to want to have that set to auto, and it'll pick up it'll pick up the radar that way. My seed, if I needed to turn off a seed sensor for some reason, maybe I had one that failed on me and was giving me a hard time, and I checked it out in the ground, it was planting, but it kept warning me I could shut that row off simply by unchecking it, and that way I could get rid of the warnings until I could get the sensor replaced. However, remember that if you do uncheck that, it's not going to warn you if it quits planting. Okay, this is my pneumatic downforce. This planter happens to have one rank. If you've got a 1795 or some kind of split row, you might have dual ranks. But for this one, I've only got one rank. Now what I want to do is if I want to zero it out, I would want to raise my planter all the way up, empty the airbags, and hit that button right there, and then that would re-zero my airbag pressure sensor. My gauge wheel downforce sensors, again, I just go in there and tell it, okay, row 3's got a sensor, and then I can toggle through all my setup and tell it, okay, row 3, row 7, row 13, row 18, row 22. I can just go right down whichever rows have sensors on them, that's how I'm going to check and set that up. My vac sensors, again, I have to select the row that my vac sensor is on. Now on an ExactEmerge planter, I can only have a vac sensor on the same row as my downforce and my ride sensors are located. So you can't put a vac sensor on a different row than where those ride and downforce sensors are located. If you have fertilizer on your planter, you want to tell it how many fertilizer sensors you've got. This one does not have fertilizer. Again, same with my ride quality sensors. I just got to tell it what rows that the ride sensors are located and then enable it. And then my row unit speed. What I want to do in here is we have what we call curve compensation. So as I go around a curve, the row that's on the outside that's going really, really fast, it'll run that meter faster so that my population will be correct. And then the row that's on the inside of the curve will slow down so that it's not over planting. So you want to make sure those are checked, and then curve compensation will work. You can uncheck them if you want to disable that function. I don't really know of a scenario when you would want to do that, but the option is there if for some reason you wanted to go ahead and disable that. The next one is my drive. This is where I set up my mapping group. Now when we went over the seed setup part, this is where I could set to where, okay, rows 1 through 6 I could plant a given population, rows 7 through 12 I could plant a different population, or I can set the mapping groups up pretty much however I want to do it. but you do have a maximum of 4 that you can set up. If you want to change how they're set up, you just go into your setup, and then you just tell it mapping group 1 is rows 1 through whatever, row 2 or section 2 is rows whatever to whatever. So you can set them up however you want. These just happen to be set up symmetrically across the planet. Okay, and then same way with my row section control. Again, I've got my clutches every 2 rows, so I'm set to go there. If for some reason they're not, you hit your arrow with the dot or your setup button, and you can go in and configure however you want your row control sections to be done. I know some guys like to have single rows on the outside and then bigger sections on the inside. You're more than welcome to do that. This one just happens to be set up with every 2 rows. And that's going to cover our planner setup section. The display tab, the only thing that's in there is a few advanced settings if you were running 2 GS3s on a really big, super large planner or something of that nature. So that's going to cover our planner setup button. Okay, we want to cover the meter runoff. The ExactEmerge planners have the ability to run each individual meter, so you can adjust it for your seed size or check and see what vacuum you need to run. But each row can have that done. So that's this meter runoff button right here. So if I select that, it brings up this page. And what I can do with this page is I can select the row that I want to run. I put in my population and my speed. So if I'm going to plant 35,000 and I'm going to plant at 8 miles an hour, and I want to run at 2,000 seeds, and what I can do is I can start, once I get everything running, I can start it right here, and then it will run through 2,000 worth of seeds, or I can change that to whatever I want my run to be, but 2,000 is a good number to use. And then it will tell you what your performance of that meter is. It'll tell you skips, it'll tell you doubles, it'll give you what your population is, and those kinds of things. So then you can figure out if the meter's running acceptable or not, or if an adjustment needs to be made. Pretty handy tool. So if you're in the shop or after you've got a couple years on the planner and you want to just check your meter and your bowl gap or your vac setting or whatever it might be, nice little tool to run, and that's done with this meter runoff button right here. Here's the plug for your row unit runoff. So if you want to back your planner in the shop and you want to run your meters to check different seed sizes or vacuum levels or whatever you're going to try to do to kind of run your meters, here's a plug. They make a harness you can plug in right here and bring your GS3 to the back of the planner, and that way you can have your display right there to give you all your meter information if you're trying to run them off in the shop. Okay, now what we want to talk about is our vacuum automation. So to get to vacuum automation, I'm going to hit the menu button, and I'm going to go to my planner auxiliary button right here, and that brings me to this page. Now what it's showing here is that I have a target vacuum set of 17, and whatever you want that target to be, you can put in there. Right now we have them synced together to where all the vacs are tied together, so all 3 are tied together. So if I make an adjustment on the top one, it's going to go ahead and adjust all the vacs to the same. Now what this is doing is this is actually allowing the planner to take over the SCVs of the tractor and maintain your vacuum at a level pressure all day long, no matter how warm or cold or what conditions the oil are in. So if I need to make some changes, I go in here to my setup, okay, and this is if I want to sync all the vacuums together, and then this is my step value. So if I want to just bump it up 1 or bump it down 1, I would put 1.0 in here. When I make an adjustment with my plus or minus button, if I want it to go up 2, I would put a 2.0 in there. So my other button over here is my setup button. So I'm going to go into setup, and here's where I set up what each SCV does. So SCV number 1 is set to raise lower, SCV 2 is set for marker, and then vacuum 1 starting at the left, vacuum 2 would be the center, and vacuum 3 would be the right. Now again, we're on a DB planner, so it's got 3 vac blowers on it. If you've just got a 1770, obviously you're just going to have 2. So you would have SCV3 and SCV4 set to vacuum 2. If I want to make changes to that, I hit the setup button here. Right now I have the planner controlled with vacuum automation, which means that means that the planner is actually controlling the vacuum. If I want to go back to controlling it with the tractor, I check this box. If I go to my next page, here's where I set up what each SCV is doing. So again, SCV1 raised, SCV2 marker, so on and so forth. I'm going to cancel out of that because I like my setup, but that's kind of how your planner automation works for your vacuum. Okay, now we want to go over the air row cleaners, the air adjustable row cleaners. So to get there, we hit the menu button down here in the corner, and we're going to go to our row cleaner button right here. And we can set some presets, light, medium, or heavy. And then if we want to adjust those presets, we can use this plus or minus button here to adjust it. Now right now, the planter's up, so it's not doing anything, but it's telling us that our air pressure is low. So if we would lower the planter, it's going to adjust those row cleaners to have the appropriate pressure for what we're trying to do or what we commanded. So if I hit light, these are my target pressures for light. If I select medium, these are my target pressures for medium.